things that we haven't really talked a lot about in our culture, but it's worth spending a moment on, is that as we move into this information world, we generate all this information, we're kind of creating an alternate version of reality. And I know that sounds really sci-fi and sort of matrixy, but what I think of it as kind of like this threshold we're crossing into, where we're moving all sorts of activity into the digital sphere that we spend so much time on. Now, in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of chatter about the demise of the post office. People are very fearful about that. They think, gosh, this great institution that our founding fathers included in the Constitution as something so vital to promote commerce in this country, it's starting to fade away. And it's been done in, yes, by email. Email has actually destroyed it. So we're sending about 25% fewer first-class letters than we did just a few years ago, and that's because we're all using email. So as we migrate over to these digital platforms, we rely less and less on traditional, kind of tangible, real-world things like the post office and posted letters. As we move away, those things start to disappear. I call it the vanishing point. Now, 20 years ago, Nick Negroponte at the MIT Media Lab gave us this edict. He said, move bits, not atoms. And what he meant was, if you can liberate the information that's inside of a product, you can move that information quite easily over the network, and maybe it's not necessary to move so many atoms around. That'll be more efficient in many respects. So that sounded like a cool idea, and if you read his book, Being Digital, you may have gotten really psyched up about it. I certainly did. I thought that's a kind of cool thing. Well, we're well down that path. We're well down that path. We've crossed this point called the vanishing point. And now you're starting to see this, and this is quite a bewildering experience. You're starting to see it in your life as you move around through town here in Los Angeles. Back in the 1990s, when I was working at MTV, I used to shop for music a lot. And I would go to stores that looked kind of like this. This is what a record shop used to look like. Today, record shops look like this, if you can find them. They're going out of business, and in fact, they're disappearing. It's hard to find a record store. About 2/3 of the record shops in the US have disappeared. But that's not all. We used to rent videos from places like this. Today, they look like this. Same thing with our bookstores. They're disappearing. And our game stores, and on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Instead, we've replaced them with things like this. This is an online storefront. So it's not really a store. It's not exactly like going into a shop, but we use the same terminology. You browse, you put things in a shopping cart, you check out, and so forth. So what we're doing is as we move into this new realm, which is a little bit bewildering, this digital realm, we're going to appropriate the terminology that we used in the real world to describe behaviors in the real world, and we're going to apply those in a metaphorical sense to the experience of browsing and shopping and consuming content on the web. But it is a radically different thing. This resembles no store that you've ever actually set foot in. And yet this is our experience of a store in the 21st century. It isn't just media. It isn't just TV, films, music. It's actually extending across almost everything that we consume. Think about this. Back in the 1990s, if you wanted to buy a car, you had to go to a place like this, and you had to talk to a guy like this. Today, you go here, or one of the thousands of other sites on the web that will help you find information about cars. About 50% of the people who shop for cars in the United States use the internet in some part of that transaction. I know I did. I recently did my car lease on the internet. I'm sure many other people in this room have done so as well. That's a big shift. I can recall clearly when I was at Sony Pictures in the 90s, people from Realtor.com and people from Edmunds came in to talk to me, and they said, in the future, people will buy their cars online, people will buy their houses online. And I said, come on, give me a break. It just seemed ridiculous. And that's really only 12 years ago. We've already crossed that threshold now where this is commonplace, this is normal behavior. And it's starting to have a real impact in the real world. It's starting to have a real influence on the way we shop for cars. If anybody in this room were to walk onto the lot of a car dealership, you'll see that the guys who sell the cars barely stir. They barely get up from their desk. They take one look at you and they say, internet shopper. They can tell. And they know they're not going to sell you a car that day, so they don't even bother to try to get out there and hawk their wares. Now, if you want to travel, if you want to go to a place like this, or a place like Thailand, or a place like India, and jump on one of these things in our crowded skies, well, back in the day, you had to go to a place like this, a travel store, and talk to a guy like this, and he'd sit down and he'd fill out some paper, and you give him a credit card or the money, you write him a check right there on the spot. So there's a lot of paper involved in this process. But today, we don't do it. We go online. We go to a place like this. So if you really want to go to the Bates Motel, you can find out about it on a site like TripAdvisor and then comparison shop across multiple vendors and get the best possible price. And so again, we've moved away. We've moved into this digital world. We've moved away from the tangible world. Now suppose you work in a business. Suppose you work at a company where good-looking people stand around whiteboards making meaningless diagrams like this or like this. Well, you might discover the next time you walk by the conference room that it's actually empty. It looked more like this. And the reason for that is that people have moved online. We're using WebEx, and we're using telepresence, and we're using GoToMeeting.com, or even Skype, which is the greatest gift to the entrepreneur ever made. Free telephone calls and video. Fantastic, free conference calls. You can spare yourself the trouble of shipping your physical body across the country to a meeting. You can have that meeting at your desktop and save yourself a great deal of time and expense as well. It isn't just about business. We're also obliterating the physical world in some other respects too. And this is kind of an interesting aspect here. Love in our relationships. The way we find out about the people we care about. Now, let's say you were interested in meeting some bodacious babes. Or some really handsome guys. Look at the way they market themselves. Vegan, they know what girls like. Nowadays, in the old days, you would go to a place like the Lounge, right? If you go to the lounges today, though, you'll find increasingly they're empty. The bars are empty. And that's because people are meeting online in greater numbers. About 25% of American relationships happen on the web. The connection is made on the internet, the first introduction, the first connection. And eHarmony will tell you that 5% of all American marriages happen at eHarmony. They start 5% of all American marriages. And if you happen to be married and you still want a little action on the side, well, in fact, there's an app for that. And it's guaranteed. One of the interesting things about the migration to these digital environments, these virtual marketplaces that match people together, is that they're highly efficient and they can surmount the limitations of geography. And so even if you have a really peculiar predilection or a really peculiar taste, there's a way for you to connect with like-minded people. So even those who have a fetish for pirate dating can connect with their loved ones. They can find a perfect match. So this is the world that we're moving into, folks. It's a completely bewildering scene, and it leaves most of us feeling confused from time to time because things are changing so fast in so many fields. Now imagine for a second that you work for a traditional media company. The motion picture business hasn't changed tremendously in the last 7 years. It really hasn't. The same business structures are in place, the same type of deal structures are in place. Oh sure, we use more special effects, we use more computers in production, but we really haven't changed the process of making a film or how it's released. So that stayed very, very similar. Well, now you can imagine the incredible shock that the motion picture companies are experiencing as they go through this digital transition. They're experiencing change on a scale that is so massive and so drastic. We could see it coming, but we couldn't prepare ourselves. There wasn't much we could do because we were so locked into a traditional style of doing business. And now the results are starting to happen. Now as more and more people move into this digital realm, we're starting to see impact on the motion picture business and particularly TV. So you've been following the changes in the music industry and the transition of the music industry for the past 10 years. We've seen that, and in some ways that's a template for where the television industry is about to go. TV is changing on so many levels. If you consider the word television, it's such an all-encompassing term, right? It means TV, the TV set in your living room. It also means the programs. I'm watching TV, the programs on the television. But it also refers to the transmission technology, and it even refers to a kind of a business, an industry. So that term, television, is very broad. What's happening is every aspect of it is changing simultaneously, and it's creating incredible havoc in that industry. So the TV set that we used to know and love in our living room, well, now that's changed, right? It's become a smart monitor connected to the internet. So that box has shifted from being kind of a dumb box that was designed just to play a television signal, and now it's a very versatile device, but perhaps even more disconcerting, every versatile device, including the one on your screen, the technology that my company Packet Video introduced 10 years ago, now is capable of playing a video signal. And as a result, people are watching video in many different places, and the entertainment companies that produce television, they're forced to chase their audience across these different platforms. That puts them in a very unusual position. In the past, they put the shows on at 8 o'clock and you would tune in and watch. They had some measure of control. Now the audience has fragmented, and the audience has migrated from platform to platform, and the TV companies must chase them across platforms. And another shift. Think about what a television network really is. A TV network means that there are literally hundreds of stations across the country, some of them wholly owned, some of them in a partnership with the broadcast company. And they represent billions of dollars of infrastructure, real towers, real stations across the country. But today, for most consumers, they're not aware of that. For most consumers, a TV network is a button, an icon on an iPad. And what's most humiliating for the broadcasters is that they share that real estate with their distribution partners, with lowly cable channels, and even local stations. So it's very confusing for a TV network to see themselves reduced down to a level where their product is sitting on the same shelf as a local TV station, a cable channel, a distributor like Dish, DirecTV, Comcast, or Time Warner Cable. And not only that, these upstart companies that have been nibbling at the heels, nibbling at the broadcast company's market share for many, many months, Hulu, Netflix, YouTube, well, they're also on the same shelf. And so in the consumer's eyes, what used to be one of the most prestigious brands, or one of the most prestigious kinds of companies in the broadcast world, is broadcast networks, well, that's been reduced down to the same level, a peer level, with YouTube and with Netflix, and that's incredible humiliation. And not only that, they share shelf space with things like Angry Birds. So these are bewildering things, but they're all moving into video. Flipboard's about to announce its own video initiative as well. They're adding video in. And so video is starting to show up at all kinds of different places. The broadcast companies are losing control of the distribution outlet. And so that's a real challenge for them. That presents them with business model challenges, but it also presents them with huge marketing challenges. And what they're up against is a beast the like of which they've never seen before. In the past, media companies, TV companies, had kind of a lock on the source of video. They were the only providers of video, so they didn't have to worry about competition. This is a diagram that charts the growth of YouTube content, uploads to YouTube, over the past 5 years. In 2008, 8 hours of video was uploaded every minute to YouTube. Today, 2011, 48 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube. That's 2 hours of video uploaded every minute of every day. At this rate, by the end of this year, uploads to YouTube will be about 1 hour per second. Think about that for a second. That's what exponential growth looks like. That's exponential growth. Now, in the TV business, if we wanted to, say, create a second TV show, or in the motion picture business, if you want to create a second movie, well, you hire a second production company, and they go out and make it. So when we grow our business, the traditional media business, we grow it linearly. That's how you scale. And so if you want 3 shows, you have to have 3 production companies. And your costs scale directly in line with that growth. So we can scale our business in the traditional media arithmetically. But here on the web, in digital media, where consumers are generating video at ridiculous rates, they can scale their business geometrically. Meaning that the percentage of content available to consumers that's professionally produced by motion picture companies and television companies, as a percentage of the whole, is going to dwindle. It's already dwindling. That's the content glut. And there is no roadmap for an entertainment company or media company to navigate these waters. Now I'm about to show you an example